everyone. All right, I'm going on 2 platforms, so we'll see how this goes. So I wanted to spend some time, I felt called to share more of my journey on just going deeper. I know I've shared a lot already, and through my posts and other lives that I've done, I've spent time going through like an overview of my story, but I want to spend the next 3 days really diving deeper into everything. So I'm a little nervous. I have to be honest about that. So I spent a couple days ago, I went through and I outlined my journey. And I really wanted to just like go back and reflect on everything that I went through across my journey, because I feel like people look at me now, they look at the posts that I've done, the way that I show up, my energy, and they just don't understand how I got from point A to point B. So I want to walk through a little bit of that, in part to give you some, I guess, just to feel better about the fact that it's not an overnight journey and it's okay to feel untethered and uncertain and in fear at times. And I want to share, like I said, my journey so that you can see the same in mine and hopefully offer some guidance along the way. So my intention is to share in 3 parts. And what I'd like to do is go at the end, I'm going to reflect and go back and say, what is the advice I would give me in that era? So, okay. I'm losing one of my devices here. Okay, so let's try this again. So, starting in 2004, I graduated from college and I moved away. I thought Buffalo was a dying city, and I decided I'm going to move. And my best friend and I at the time picked up and left. We didn't have jobs, and we thought, we didn't care. It wasn't even an issue. It was just like, we'll find them when we get there. We'll figure it out when we get there. I think a lot of people wouldn't have even gone in that direction. They wouldn't have trusted that they would find something when they got there. So we did that, and within the first week or so, we all got a job, or we both got a job, and started working. And for me, I started as a customer service rep at a company called TransUnion, and I ended up right away. They started me in customer service, and they said to me, they pulled me into another division right off the bat for client service. They wanted me to handhold their troubled customers. And so one of the girls locally in Charlotte, who was an on-site client representative, ended up going on maternity leave, so they asked me to fill in for her. And it was a client that was quite needy, and it was big shoes to fill, right? So I ended up doing really well in that position, and so they asked me to start traveling down to Orlando, Florida. So I actually only lived in Charlotte for 8 months after college, and I said yes. It was a no-brainer decision for me. So sorry, my devices are here. Let's try this. Okay. It was a no-brainer decision for me. It was like, yes, I'll go. And this period of time was a period of yeses for me. I just was so eager to build and develop my career that it didn't matter what the opportunity was. I just took it, because I started out saying that my life wouldn't be complete. I didn't want anything else in my life until I had my career. So I ended up moving down to Florida. I traveled for a few months back and forth every week, working down there, and then I'd come home on the weekend and pack. And ended up moving down there. So that was my first promotion at that company. And within I was in Orlando for a couple of years. And I remember during that time, yes, I was working, I was putting my head down working, but I was also really expanding my role. Like I always went above and beyond in the role that I was in. I didn't believe that I was in some sort of box or that there were any stipulations around what I couldn't do. I was there to represent the company. I was an on-site rep down at SunTrust Bank in Florida. And I cared for the relationship. I used to say that I was the face of TransUnion for them there. There was one other woman with me there. So at the time, I will say I started feeling like, I remember feeling like I wanted more. And I didn't really know what it was. So I considered going back to school. I actually considered going to law school because I thought I like to debate things with people. I like to argue, and that's like, I'm sure all the lawyers that are watching this are like, no, that's not why you go to law school. But I was searching. I remember I bought my first personal development book. It was called 20 Something, 20 Everything. And it was all based around a quarter life crisis. And I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew something was missing. And I wouldn't have gone to get that book had I not thought that. And let's see. So from there, I ended up having a director. One of our directors came down to see me, and she said to me, you're so much more, like I see so much more in you. I see so much of myself in you. And I think that you should be an analyst. So I want you to move to Delaware and be an analyst. And I was very excited, but I was terrified. It was a huge promotion for me at the time. I didn't even interview for it. They knew that they wanted me and hired me. And so I moved to Delaware, and I remember walking in on my first day, and I was like, man, I don't know how to be an analyst. And now I know that being an analyst it's not a learned skill. It's innate within you. It's just the way that you think and process information. And so that's what I did. I was a product development analyst, and I remember I spent a lot of time trying to prove myself on that team. I was surrounded by a lot of really smart people. I was intimidated by my boss. He was extremely intelligent, and I just felt like an outsider on the team. I remember just feeling like I felt like I wasn't good enough. I feel like that was probably my own stuff, coming through, and just that whole like not knowing how to be an analyst and not really knowing how to trust that someone else sees something in me. And sometimes, I guess one of the first pieces here is, when someone sees something in you, don't take that for granted, and let that, receive that, like hear that message from them, and, let yourself reflect on it a little bit. Because it's happening for a reason. So what happened was, in Delaware, I ended up about a year into my role, a little less than a year into my role, the company got acquired. And at the time, I was already looking for more. I was looking for, going back, I mentioned law school before. Now I was looking at other master's programs. And I thought I wanted to go back to school. So they were getting acquired, and I was afraid that they weren't sure if they were going to support continuing education. So I was like, well, if they're not going to support my continued growth, I'm going to leave. And my mom at the time had been asking me, for the 4 years I was gone, if I would come back to Buffalo. And I every time I was like, no, like I didn't think I'd ever come back to Buffalo. And so at that point in time, with all of the upheaval and me watching hundreds of people being walked out the door every day in this acquisition, I thought I was unsafe. I felt unsafe, you know? So I told my mom, I said, okay, I'll move back to Buffalo if I get a job there. And so I ended up doing a search in Buffalo, and I got hired at M&T. And I remember speaking to the recruiter, and I was talking to her about like a level 1 or level 2 analyst role there. And she said to me, she said, you're overqualified. I want to hire you as a senior analyst. And I was like, whoa, like at M&T, you know, the senior analyst role, I don't know, required 10 plus years experience, at least, I would say. But again, like here's this woman who saw something in me, and I just took that leap of faith and trusted it. So I moved back to Buffalo. And I remember starting at M&T. My start there wasn't a smooth one, to say the least. I struggled with my boss quite a bit. She was very, very strong voiced female, and her and I butt heads quite a bit in the beginning. And I remember at one point she said to me, I need you to stop talking and start doing. And I would cry. Like I was crying like a lot at work, and oh my gosh, like it was quite the initiation into M&T. But which, by the way, everything in these videos is my experience. It's you know, my opinions. It's by no means a reflection of any of the companies that I worked for. So it was rough. It was a rough start. And from that moment that she said that to me, something just snapped in me, and I just put my head down and started working my ass off. So that's when I feel like probably, like up until that point, yes, I was working, but I wasn't in that like pure on hustle mode, like that I'm gonna come in earlier than everyone else, stay later than everyone else. Like I am here to prove what I can do. Nobody's gonna tell me that I can't do this. And I put my head down and I worked hard. And I learned a lot in that time. I was working in technology at the time, and I was building relationships with our business partners and really bridging the gaps between technology and business, and building new systems for our business partners. And I felt good. I started feeling really good about my abilities and what I was able to accomplish. I was implementing new systems, and I started building up confidence in my abilities. And what ended up happening was, I'm just looking at my notes because I don't want to miss anything. I'm going up to like 2010. I started in 2004, so I'm up to like 2010. After 2 years at M&T, I got promoted to banking officer. And I remember I had been pushing my boss at the time, like, how do I get promoted to the next position? And she said to me, you should be worried about becoming a banking officer. And I was like, what is a banking officer? Like, I had no idea that was even a thing at banks. And so that was my hustle mode. I was hustling to get to that next position. And so after 2 years, I was promoted to banking officer, which is rare at the bank. It's very rare. I didn't know it at the time, but whatever. I was promoted to banking officer, and they nominated me for this technology development program. So it was like for, you know, the kids who come in from the Ivy League schools and get in those management fast track programs. This was for the same type of program, but for those who were already at the bank and they wanted to put on a fast track, but, you know, maybe we didn't, you know, come in on this program. So I started in that program, and I started getting exposure to the leadership across the bank. And again, I was still very much like putting my head down and working. I wasn't exploring much from a self-development perspective. I had those books, like I said, I bought that first book. I never really did read it. I would start it and put it down, but I kept looking for positions or school programs, like educational programs, to make me feel like I was achieving something, that I was moving forward in my career. So then here comes my first pivot in 2011. So it's really cool in my journey because I notice a pattern in it. So I'm going to stop this at the first pivot. And this first pivot was basically, I started experiencing anxiety. And I wasn't used to dealing with anxiety. And what I realized was that I had been pushing so much of my emotion down, and I reached a breaking point. And that's how I felt. I remember going to the doctor, and I asked for medication. Now, those of you who know me now, I don't believe in dependencies. I'm not telling anyone to not take medication, but I do believe that you have the power within you to shift those things, just like physical ailments, mental ailments as well. Yes, I do believe there's a time and place for medication. Again, this is my viewpoint. I'm not telling anybody to not take medication, but this was a big moment for me because here I am, I go to the doctor, someone who doesn't believe in that, and I'm asking for medication because my anxiety was so bad. I was like, I can't deal with this. Like, I need medication. And this is a problem in our society. We want the quickest fix. We want to just erase our problems. We don't want to feel in order to heal. So I went on medication, and she said to me, I'm not going to give this medication to you unless you go to a therapist. And kudos to this woman, because I wish more people did that instead of just, slapping your hand with a prescription and walking you out the door. So I did that. I went to a therapist, and I had so many walls up. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to communicate my feelings. At the time, I felt that it was all of these things. Like, there's so much of my life that again, this is still like, it's more detailed, but it's still a high level overview. There was some deaths. I had lost two of my favorite grandparents, and moving, across all those states, starting new positions, struggling in those positions. I had been dating somebody who just up and left the relationship, and I had all these things that I felt had accumulated and just created all this anxiety. So I thought it was everything happening right now. But what I learned in therapy was that it was really that anxiety, that expression of anxiety, like that sudden appearance of me feeling this anxiety that I felt like I couldn't deal with, really was an invitation to me. And this is actually where I'm going to wrap up here with the story for day one. But this anxiety, it's perfect because it's what people are going through right now. This is a pivot. And that's what I see now. So like, I see now that anxiety was inviting me to stop suppressing my emotions, to stop burying everything in my work, in food, in shopping. Stop burying everything and suppressing it, and let it express. It wanted to come out. And as humans, we tend to suppress. And our bodies are just trying to communicate with us, and they do that by sending us messages. And when we don't listen, to those little nudges, like for me, right? Buying that book, looking at educational programs. Those were nudges for me to start exploring more about who I am and what I want. And I didn't listen to them. When I was at, these positions and I would cry, and I was just hustling to prove myself, I remember like hiding in rooms to cry and be emotional because I was just that was like not strong. I needed to put my head down and work my ass off and prove myself and go up the corporate ladder. And all of that burying, that suppression, exploded in me. And for me, it came out in anxiety. So not having ever dealt with anxiety before, obviously I went to a therapist and we started that exploration. And that's where I'm going to leave it. So what advice would I give to myself? I think I've already sort of covered that. But in that time frame, notice the nudges. There are people right now, like if you're watching and you're so buried in your work and you're just like, yeah, like this is my career, and you don't feel like there's much else to your life. I was so identified with my work. Like my job was everything. It's who I was. If that's you, I want to invite you to explore more of who you are. Explore more than expand yourself beyond your job. And this is perfect because this is where so many people are right now. Who am I without driving to work every day? Who am I with having to take care of my kids every day with me, as a parent? Like 24/7. Obviously, they were taking care of their kids before, but 24/7. I invite you to explore those nudges. If you feel like something is off, like you don't know what it is, you can't put your finger on it, don't put your head down. Please don't put your head down and just work it away. If you notice yourself struggling with food, dieting back and forth, gaining and losing weight, don't ignore that. If you're one of those people that says, shopping makes me feel better, drinking makes me feel better, gambling makes me feel better, working out obsessively makes me feel better, whatever it is, like if you are relying on external things to make you feel better, to define who you are, to make you complete, make you whole, make you feel like you have a purpose on this earth, I invite you to explore that. Because at some point, it's going to explode. It will. And for so many people, it comes in retirement. It comes in those moments when they're able to slow down and they're getting out of that hustle. And they're like, wow, like, this is, again, stripping away that identity. Who am I without this job? I'm retired now. Most people wait that long to go through this discovery process. Don't do that to yourself, please. This makes me like emotional talking about it because I'm so passionate about it. So that's what I would tell myself looking back. Don't be afraid to explore those nudges. Okay. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll go on the upswing of the anxiety piece. So I'll see you tomorrow at noon.